The 3D platformer is a massively underrepresented genre on the Sega Saturn. While 3D games were taking the world by storm in this generation, thanks to the success of the Sony PlayStation, Sega's 32-bit wonder was floundering due to its specifications favouring 2D games over 3D. But that's not to say there isn't 3D platformers on the Saturn, and in this video we're going to take a look at 5 of them. Now, to accommodate 5 3D Saturn platformers, I'm defining a 3D game as any game that lets you explore a 3D space. This doesn't mean the game has to be true 3D. It can be true 3D, but it can also mix 3D with 2D art, or be entirely rendered with 2D art, but still allow 3D movement thanks to an isometric perspective. Hopefully that makes sense? Alright, let's get on with it. Whizz is an isometric platformer developed by Flare Software and released in 1997. You take control of the eponymous Whizz the Rabbit and have to run around the various fantasy worlds collecting gems and making it to your hot air balloon before the time runs out. Whizz's controls are fixed to a 4-way grid, and unfortunately it follows a diamond configuration like Qbert, which doesn't really translate very well to a cross-shaped D-pad. You can adjust to it, but it doesn't feel particularly natural at first. Whizz can also attack enemies by spinning like a tornado. It's a simple enough game, but it's spoiled by each stage's strict time limit. You cannot stop to explore thanks to this, and it really spoils the experience alongside an absolutely brutal damage system. You don't have any invincibility frames when you get hit, which means enemies can quickly drain your health if you don't dispatch them quickly. Unfortunately, Whizz's name being a colloquialism for urine is rather apt in this case. Bug is a strange one. Released in 1995 by Real Time Associates, Bug is an actor trying to make his name in Hollywood, and each stage is supposed to be taking place on a movie set. It's got a real 90s smart aleck attitude to it that gets a little annoying, but this is a mascot platformer, so it's to be expected, especially from a Western developed game in the 90s. What makes the game strange is it's limited to 4-way movement like Whizz, except this time you can only navigate narrow pathways. You definitely move in a 3D space, but it still feels quite restrictive. Bug is a decent enough platformer, but it doesn't really do anything special and has a hard time standing out from the crowd. If you're starved for 3D platforming, then this is an absolutely fine time waster, but its repetitive nature will soon bore you to tears. Ninpen Manmaru is a Japanese exclusive Saturn game developed by Tam and released in 1997. It's based on an anime of the same name, and despite a lot of cutscenes featuring Japanese dialogue, it's still quite a friendly game if you don't understand the language, as the action is fairly simple 3D platforming. The game is entirely rendered in true 3D, and you have to guide your little penguin around the stages, collecting coins, avoiding enemies, and finding a way to the exit. It's a very simple game, but the execution is solid, and it looks pretty good for a full 3D Saturn game. The controls are a little finicky and definitely favour the D-pad over an analog stick, but once again you can get used to them if you stick with it. Ninpen Manmaru is a decent little game that will certainly entertain platformer fans. Sonic 3D Flickies Island on the Saturn is an enhanced port of the isometric 1996 Traveller's Tales original. Released the following year, the game has been given a fresh lick of paint, a new 3D special stage, and a new soundtrack courtesy of Richard Jakes. It is generally regarded the best version of the game, and while the stages were ported over wholesale to the PC version released later in 1997, the PC version does not have the Saturn special stages, and features a similar, if inferior, take on them. Sonic 3D is a lot more explorative compared to Sonic's 2D offerings, and tasks players with freeing 5 Flickies from their badnik prisons and then taking them to a big rig to progress. It's a solid little game that might not have the same twitchy thrill ride action as the series' previous 2D offerings, but what it offers is well built with responsive controls. It's certainly worth checking out if you like Sonic or 3D platformers. Finally, we have a real diamond in the rough. Released only in Japan in 1997, Willy Wombat is a 3D platformer developed by Westone of Wonder Boy fame. Despite being a Japan exclusive, the game's cutscenes are voiced entirely in English with Japanese subtitles, which makes it extremely friendly to English audiences. Willy Wombat has to navigate each stage, collecting gems, defeating enemies, and doing some light puzzling in order to progress. You also have complete control over the camera using the shoulder buttons, which really elevates this game over its contemporaries. This is a great little game that controls well and features a lot of depth thanks to its varied stage designs. It also features a character named after a slang term for a penis, and has this absolute scorcher of a title theme.
Let's find a way, Willy Wombat.
Interestingly, Willy Wombat was the working name for Crash Bandicoot and had to be changed during development thanks to the existence of Westone's Willy Wombat. The more you know! As a quick addendum, I'd like to make you all aware of our full review of another 3D Saturn platformer, Croc Legend of the Gobbos. There's a link in the description if you'd like to see a more in-depth look at that game from earlier this year. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you've all discovered some new Saturn games to try out. Bye for now!
Let's find a way, Willy Wombat.